one here? I'm gonna scooch over there.
Yeah, you guys are like, come be friends.
Not yeah, the. I'm not drinking out of that water, so I'm keeping that. I'm doing this too.
I'm gonna put
You're
these
wise.
away so I don't accidentally drink.
All right, hi everybody. You're at the Hire This Woman panel, and for those of you, I'm assuming many of you are familiar with the column I write on Comics Alliance every week called Hire This Woman. And just to give you guys a little background before I introduce our esteemed panelists, I pitched the column because I used to be an editor at DC Comics, and it was really hard sometimes to find female creators, even though I really wanted to. There's no really good database of female creators. There's no easy way to just find people and know, as an editor, that they can come through and actually, do work of the quality you need. And so I really wanted to provide that resource for people so that they could have a way of saying, oh, okay, like here's this person's work, here's who they are, here's how fast they can draw an issue or write an issue, and know more about the person to help them hire more women, which is the goal. So if we can just go down the line, everybody can introduce themselves and talk about what they do.
Oh, wow. Now I realize I sat in the wrong seat. I should be down there. My name is Amy Chu. I was featured, I forgot when, back in December. I am a self-publisher and a writer. My current Kickstarter, Girls Night Out, is going on right now. I've published 3 of them, 2 of them through Kickstarter, and I was recently hired for a Vertigo anthology that's coming out April 30th. So look out for it.
Hi guys, I'm Heather Newfer. I'm a comic book writer. I write a lot of licensed properties, including My Little Pony, Strawberry Shortcake, Simpsons, Vampire Diaries, things like that. And yeah, this is my first time in Seattle Comic Con. It's pretty great.
Karina Becco. I've worked on Planet of the Apes with my co-writer Gabriel Hardman and Star Wars Legacy. I wrote something for Image Shadowline called Heathen Town a little while back. And I also worked on Once Upon a Time, the adaptation of the TV show for Marvel.
Hi, I'm Margaret Scott. I'm a comic book and cartoon writer, specializing in voice action. I've worked on Transformers, both the comics and several of the cartoons, as well as other properties. I've written on the TV show Ultimate Spider-Man and things like that. And my new miniseries, Transformers Windblade, is going to come out in April.
I'm Robin Robinson, also known as the Gorgonist, and I mostly work in, let's see what there's, okay, I mostly work in children's publishing, but I'm passionate about comics, and I'm doing a webcomic right now called, it's Ushala at World's End, and it's a feminist fantasy comic, and I've put out a bunch of indie picture books as well as working with some bigger companies, and I'm pitching some kids comics this year.
All right, so to start, if you guys can just sort of, Thunderdome over who gets to go first. But if you can each talk about your background and training and sort of what led you to the work you're doing now.
I'll start, because nobody else is. And then I'm done, and all of you have to go. So I have no training in comics. I have a haphazard degree in journalism, and I sort of ended up where I am because I really have a passion for all ages storytelling, and chased that to the Jim Henson Company a few years ago and worked for them. And after I left, I got asked if I would pitch for a comic book, and I ended up pitching for Fraggle Rock, and for some brilliant, unimaginable reason, they picked they picked my story to be the first one. And after that, I really just kind of fell into it, and one job became another, and that's how I ended up here. And that's all.
Yeah, I'll go for it. So it's funny because I get asked in interviews sometimes where it's like, how do you get where you are? And my first thing is, go to university for 4 years. So I attended NYU's Tisch School of the Arts. I got a degree in dramatic writing with a focus in television. And I got to study under a lot of great cartoon writers and comic book writers, also like Charlie Rubin or Joe Kelly. And moved out to Los Angeles, started writing for various different action-oriented cartoons. And then when I started working on the Transformers Prime TV show, they asked me to also co-write the some of the comics. So I co-wrote Transformers Rage of the Dinobots, as well as Transformers Prime Beast Hunters, their ongoing comic. So.
Well, I guess I can split the difference because I did go to university, and I have a degree, but it's in zoology, so it has nothing to do with comics, except that I can write creatures really well, I think, because of that. So as far as comics, I just have been around comics a lot, and we just eventually got into creating them. So I don't really know how it happened. It just happened.
Yeah, I also was around comics my entire life, so I went to school for game art and design, ended up graduating with a children's book portfolio, and now it's all about comics. I just kept putting it off as being like, oh, this is where I should be, this is where I should be. Nah. It's all about comics. From childhood, that was like, you know, just grew up reading things and always wanting more and wanting to be involved in that process, and so you just go ahead and start making them, even if no one wants to see them. So that's been definitely like part of my life.
Yeah, I'm kind of the opposite. I didn't grow up reading. I mean, I read comics as much as any kid reads comics, like Donald Duck or whatever, but I got into it purely by accident. I got into it quite late. Just on a lark, I have a Harvard MBA. I studied architecture at MIT. Never wrote. I wrote, PowerPoint presentations for years, which turned out to be great training for comic writing because, it's short bullet points. Just on a lark, I took a class, an online class on Intro to Comic Writing to help out a friend who asked me to help her on the business side. And I took a class, I get online, and it's like 12 other guys in the class and me, and these 12 guys clearly grew up reading comics because the entire conversation was all about characters I had no idea. So I'm Wikipediaing during the entire time, because I'm trying to keep up and trying to pretend I know what I'm doing. But the short story is that it is a short story writing class. I wrote the story, and my story gets picked as the story to discuss because it was a good story, and whereupon I was like, this is all a terrible, terrible mistake because I didn't really think that I was actually going to write. But then I got the bug, and I started writing, and now I write comics all the time, and my husband is like, what the fuck is going on? Because I was not into comics, and now I'm all about comics. There are comics all over the house. I go pick up my kids, and they're like, the teachers are like, what are you doing? It's, I'm writing comics. I do comics all the time. I self-publish comics. It's all about comics. I can't stop doing comics. So I literally ran into someone I knew from college who had just happened to be walking by, and she's like, what are you doing here? I'm like, okay, I haven't seen you in years, but yeah, I am now doing comics. So that is the story. This is purely by accident. No, it's completely unplanned. So, but I love it. So the moral of the story is you can't really plan these things. It's like you find out what you love, and then you end up doing it. So.
All right, so I'm going to start with Robin.
Oh, no.
Sorry, Robin. How would you describe your creative style?
I have 1 foot in like classic kid lit and 1 foot in video gamey pop culture. I definitely have I have a very painterly style. It's kind of gouache and very textured and warm, but still digital. And then I can do a more like traditional illustration style. So instead of doing like superhero comic work that's really slick, it's all very it's a little bit organic. Like I like to have a lot of texture and a lot of warmth and controlled color palettes and stuff. Are you good?
Oh, yeah, so sorry. In terms of my style, post-apocalyptic. Yeah, no. I I joke with my friends that because my first comic book co-writing was called Rage of the Dinobots, that really sums up my writing style. But really what I like to excel at and what I really love about comic books is what I call holding hands, which is I feel like the thing about comics that I love so much and the thing I love about cartoons so much is these are really long-lived properties that still have lots of places to tell stories inside of the continuity instead of going back and retconning, and that's where I really love to live, and I love to do the things that bridge. I've done a lot of work where, you know, oh, we've got this video game and we've got this other thing and we really want to like make a comic book that explains why all the people in this video game are red and all the people in the book are blue, and it's like, okay, I can do that. Everyone fell in a thing of paint. But more advanced than that. Like that's, I promise. But that's what I really love, is that kind of problem solving. I actually used to do this series of shorts where we would call called Wrong Side Comics, where we would tell tiny stories in comics that explained why certain things were that had never been addressed or explored. So I had this story about like, why is Steve Rogers, why is he the only one that the super soldier serum worked on? Well, because he has lupus, and since he has an autoimmune disease, like that affects the, and I do a whole comic about that. It's like, why did Martha Kent, like why was she on that road when the meteor crashed? Because they were getting a divorce and he was dropping her off at her sister's house. Like, that's where I live.
Well, I guess I really try to tailor what I'm doing to the project. I don't know that I really could categorize. I like dark when I'm doing my own work, my own creator-owned stuff. It's dark. It's usually post-apocalyptic. I guess some of it is. And I guess I just like to tell stories about the people in the situations that are beyond what a normal person would get into, and scary or exciting. And usually when I'm working on the licensed stuff, it's more trying to figure out what the tone of the original was, and then trying to make it feel like it was in the world. The new thing I'm creating is a new story, but it's in the world of that already created thing. So I try to be respectful in that way.
That's cool. Gosh, do I have a style? I'll ask my editors in the front row. No, I don't think I have a style. I guess when I really enjoy writing, or when I feel like I'm actually doing a good job, is definitely dialogue and character kind of stuff. In licensed stuff, I do try to be really appreciative of the original property and try not to pander, which has become sort of an issue with My Little Pony. But I really try to actually make stories that I want to read, that actually make sense to me and aren't just trying to do something to do something. When I'm writing for myself, it's definitely more love and violence and monsters. Those would probably be the three things that come up when I'm actually writing for myself. So yeah, not really any post-apocalyptic. Oh wait, I do have a post-apocalyptic story, don't I? I do. So okay, I'll go on that too.
That's the secret for female writers. When you think of female writers, they're like, all right, give us your post-apocalyptic story. Let's see some nihilism there.
I also have a post-apocalyptic story. You know, it resonates. You know, it's good. You know, my style is still in development. You know, if you pick up my anthology, you'll see it's all different genres. But I do have people have pointed out to me, and I recognize this. The way I try to write, the way I write is very much of like, I think somebody explained as an emotional gut punch. I am most interested in provoking a reaction from the reader. Like my ultimate goal is to make a guy cry at the end of the story. No, seriously, or a surprise. You know, like it's something. You know, so like I need to get out of this rut, because it's become this thing where I typically write the ending first, because I want the payoff at the end, whatever that emotion is, and I work my way backwards. So it turns into this thing, and I'm trying to get a little bit out of it because it's, now it's expected that there is a reveal at the end like that. But I think the closest thing, and I think I'm subliminally influenced by O. Henry. I read a lot of O. Henry when I was a kid, and they're short stories with like a twist. And it's usually funny, but sometimes it's really sad and poignant. So, so I try to go back and forth with that. But the most important thing to me is what the reader is going to experience during the story. That's like my thing, I guess.
I'm going to start with you now.
Oh.
What's your dream project?
I hate that question. Also because I didn't grow up reading comics. I think some people have this idea of like their dream character. I never had that. I'm like a very practical writer. It's like what my ideal project, honestly, it's kind of like, so I have the chops, is that taking a minor character that people have forgotten about, and if like I do a good job, it becomes like the Wolverine, right? Wolverine was originally a character that was just like, not a big character, but with the right writer and the artist, you can have a great property. So I'm kind of like, that's what I'm hoping to do.
That's probably a better answer than I'll have. I guess for me, the ideal project is more about who I'm working with. Like I have. No, I have visions of working with my friends in the business and no, I don't want to say that. I was going to say having complete creative freedom, but I also think that can be a bad thing, and that's where you want to have good editors and people that you trust who are on the same page. So it's really more of a situation where you'd actually be working with people you love on a project you love and not getting a lot of notes. So
yeah, I don't have a specific character. Like, I don't have a dream character that I've always wanted to write, that sort of thing. It's more about I like to write horror, and I would like to be able to do more of my own projects and make a living at writing my own horror. I guess I shouldn't say horrible stories. I intend them to be fabulous stories that are in the horror genre.
Wonder Woman, just hands down. if anyone out there has a burning desire to hire someone to write Wonder Woman, just right here. But no, actually, what I really love is I love to be able to combine my writing with the company itself. My favorite thing to do, my ideal project, is the times when I get to work with a company who's trying to expand and trying to grow comics and reach those comics out to a larger audience, and I can help them with my book to help expand that audience and to help the company expand as well. More than anything, I love the idea of pushing beyond what we normally think of as what does a comic have to be, or who is a comic reader, and reaching out to those people and really breaking down those boundaries. That's so important to me, and any time that I can do that, or I can link up with another, especially another kind of platform, so we're like, oh my gosh, you guys remember this great part of this video game that never got talked about? We're gonna give you that untold story, you're gonna get a whole new kind of genre or medium to live in. Like, that's the best.
I have a lot of dream projects, and I'm lucky because, being indie, I can kind of work on some babies of my own no matter what. But, oh my goodness, I want to do a graphic novel adaptation of The Neverending Story. Like, and anything by Diana Wynne Jones, anything. Like, I really love graphic novel adaptations of kidlit, YA fiction. It's a really interesting thing because there are a lot of nerds who read a lot of books, and they don't read comics because they don't know there are comics for them, and bridging that is really great. Like, a way to sort of, like, bring some of these beloved characters and beloved worlds that have never really, haven't really hit that comic world. I really want to see, like, a few more things just really come to life. And I've seen, like, Hope Larson did a wonderful Wrinkle in Time. I mean, it's so spectacular. And, I've had some people talk about, oh, but I don't want to see someone else's version of a character. I want to, I'm going to envision it myself. And I'm like, yeah, I've never had a problem having my own versions of characters, even after seeing films and animated TV series. Like, I think that it's really neat to see people's interpretations, especially if you're trying to really get into the meat of the character. So that would be, yeah, Neverending Story. Give me any classic kidlit or any, like, current middle grade especially, like YA novels. I'm actually not a dystopian. I'm the non-dystopian. I'm like, no, give me something like with a lot more. I want hope, and I want
Get Out.
fantasy. Get out. I'm gone. Yeah, I like a little bit of hope, and I like to, because I want to dash your hopes. I want to start out with everything seeming fine, and then I want to make it horrible, and then it'll be
That's
okay
a
at
nice
the end.
recovery.
You are the apocalypse.
That's so metal.
So who are some comic creators that inspire you guys?
Can I start? Okay, right now my two favorite artists are Becky Cloonan and Fiona Staples. Cannot look at enough stuff by them. My classics are Tuva Janssen, who's the Moomin Troll series. It's like Winnie the Pooh, but existential. And it's Finnish, and it's amazing, and she's my total idol, and she's been dead for like 30 years, and I don't care, I still love her. And then, let's see, Shigeru Mizuki, who's like also a million years old. He's still alive, and he's Gegege no Kitaro, and really classic Japanese weird monster stuff. He's finally in print now, thanks to Drawn and Quarterly. He's in print, and like, everything he has ever done has been like this huge, like, oh, global folklore, bring it to me. I love all that.
Gosh, where do I start? No, I think in terms of art that really inspires me, I love Emma Rios's art, the fluidity in that movement. I love James Jean's covers, and that sort of painterly style. I'm completely in love with Saga, but who isn't? I mean, that's like saying ice cream's nice. But there's some really amazing, innovative comics. There's a great graphic novel that came out a couple years ago called One Soul, which I just think is the most fantastic idea, where it's like the lifespan of like 20 different people. That's actually each panel can be read on its own flip book style, and then they can also be read in conjunction. Like, that is so cool. The Black Mirror, I think, is probably the best Batman graphic novel ever written. And anything by Greg Rucka. Like, talk about someone who really understood Wonder Woman. He did a fantastic job. I would read anything by him.
I have a lot of influences that come from outside comics, but I think especially when I was first starting, what I most read was Harvey Pekar, because I really liked the fact he could take anything and make it a story and make it little, just human interest. He could make anything interesting, and I read Ego and Hubris, if I can spit that word out, was a kind of a revelation to me. I was like, wow, you can just do anything with comics. You don't have to be bound by genre. So I'm going to go with that.
That's pretty good. I take a lot of my influence outside of comics. So I actually don't read too many comics, but I read Hawkeye, which I love. It's the only comic that I usually go up in the store and hand to my dude. And Hellboy, and I always read Mouse Guard. David is an amazing sort of consummate entertainer, and we have a lot of friends who are artists who are really inspiring. What I always say, first artist I ever worked with, Jeff Stokely, is pretty fantastic. And it's always nice when you know people in the business, because that can be really inspiring to see all the great stuff they do, and it sort of raises the bar to make you actually want to make them proud. So, yeah.
I agree. I buy comics based on the creative team behind them, the writers and the artists. I think that's what makes the story. So I study them, and I would say Terry Moore and Mike Mignola are like what I look at most carefully, because the simplicity of the storytelling, the fluidity, they're both artists, but they can write. I wish I were an artist. I just need to put the time in at some point. I took an art class and I'm just crap. I need to practice. But yeah, Terry Moore and Mike Mignola, definitely. I love their stuff. I met Mike Mignola at Fan Expo recently. Just by coincidence, I'm talking to this guy who introduced himself as, this is like one of my amazing con stories, but this guy who introduces himself as Steve, and I'm talking with Steve. It turns out to be Steve McNiven, you know, because I don't know anything about these guys, right? So I'm talking to Steve McNiven. He's like, hey, meet my friend Mike Mignola. And I do know who Mike Mignola is. And then it was the very awkward conversation where, like, I'm sorry, I missed your entire run of Hellboy because I'm kind of new to comics. So he sent me the entire library of trades, like, because he was so nice, because I was like, I felt really bad. I didn't want to lie because I couldn't be all fangirlish. He sends me the whole thing, and I read the whole thing. I'm like, wow, that's just amazing. So yeah, so that's my.
So since you guys brought it up, what are things outside of comics that inspire you to make comics?
Okay, I'll start again. I'm a big music junkie. I love listening to random and sometimes really old music, and watching really bad shows from the 60s and 70s. I really love some Flying Nun and and Gidget and anything made for very old people. So I really pull a lot of influence just from kind of emotions that you get from random things you love. And I think a lot of people get sort of mired in staying and, you know, looking at comics and then getting kind of caught up in, oh crap, look what they did, that's awesome. Like, how can I ever do something like that? So I find it really helpful to sort of get inspiration from other sources, because then you don't have that comparison, which can really mess you up. I just saw some people I know.
Yeah, I totally agree that it can kind of eat its own tail
Yeah.
if you're just aping what was cool and then going back and then some, you know, it can get really, so I guess music is also something that's, can take for emotion, but literature and film is also, Paul Bowles, I guess, was a big influence on me just writing-wise, and Val Lewton movies, the kind of like, Cat People, the 40s, kind of dark. A lot of the mood is important for me to think of when I'm trying to write, to get that mood into the piece, even though it'll be kind of reimagined again as images. It's still, somehow it goes through that mill and comes out as something different, but it's good to have something to kind of focus on in the beginning. So.
I'm tremendously inspired by Japanese animation. Hayao Miyazaki, obviously, but also some of the more challenging animes. Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex was a wonderful exploration of what you can and can't do on a budget. I loved that Paprika just really challenged your idea of reality. How far can you push drawing? You know, and Summer Wars was just fantastic in terms of the whole movie is staged like a play, and the idea of staging something on basically a flat set and having your characters constantly always moving, even though beyond your protagonists, like giving the whole scene life is fantastic. I also read a tremendous amount of nonfiction. It's really bad when I go to the airport because I always have something that's like germ warfare in the 1920s, and I'm like, that's not gonna freak TSA out. But no, I'm tremendously interested in any story that people have to tell, and especially the science writing that's coming out now is so good. If you guys have never read like Packing for Mars, it's a story of essentially the birth of the space program and how incredibly hard and stupid and nonsensical it is to put human beings into the vacuum of space. And I was like, that would be a fantastic comic. There was a whole thing about just how much energy it took from like 20 different departments to get a flag on the moon.
Yeah. Well, for art, the natural world, you gotta start with like what's really there, and then you can stylize from that. So I'm always like, if I'm getting too in my head, and again, like, if you're reading too many comics and seeing too much animation and you start just drawing from other people's style, just go hike around, like, look at what leaves really look like and what animals really look like, and, you know, people watch, and just sort of like reconnect. I'm really inspired also just by everybody I know who is in the indie community, because they're all trying to make the projects that aren't being made for them. And it's really interesting to sort of like hear what they want and like look at their like fan characters and like what people are hand making because no one is like trying to connect with them. So there's a lot of that. Like there are some sort of like social movements going on with inclusiveness about like the trans inclusion movement is really interesting, and I find a lot of that like it's a neat place to start when you're like, okay, challenging your own assumptions about like what your characters should be and how they should interact, and it's kind of a nice place. So like I'm there with you also with like, God, you gotta look at science and, you know, like actually have some nonfiction so that you can have a really good groundwork for what you're doing. So when I do creatures, it's like, yeah, just let's see everything there is to know about ecology and biology and zoology. Like, let's just, you know, gotta get to the basics. Like, start with nature and then move from there.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I'm not really good with the fantasy. I like everything to be kind of science-based. So most of my ideas, I mean, like my inspiration in general, the ideas don't come from comics. The inspiration comes from comics in that I think the level of comics right now is very high. I'm just inspired by what people are doing right now in art and writing. But my ideas mostly actually, now that I think about it, they really come from real life stories. Like I get a lot of ideas from The Economist. Like of what's going on in the world. Like there's some weird stuff going on in the world. Like they're just great stories. Why do I have to make up anything when there's actually real life stuff that's happening? Because I'm an MIT alum, I get the technology review. I get a lot of ideas from the technology review. Because again, there's some like crazy tech stuff that's coming right around the corner, and they make great stories. So, you know, those are kind of like the backdrop.
I was hoping you guys could talk about not just the question I ask in the column is what's your ideal professional environment, but I'm also curious about the spaces you guys create in and what you surround yourself with that sort of helps your process.
I try to keep my kids out of my study. I try to go as many cons as I can because I think that the sort of peer creator, you know, bubble or whatever, it's a very comfortable thing. It's great for writers. I like to, you know, hang out with as many women creators as I can because I think it's a very supportive environment usually. But it's kind of hard. I don't know. I don't even know how to answer. You guys answer that.
Yeah, I do agree. When the women in comics are wonderfully supportive, which is freaking awesome. Like, you know, in so many other areas of our lives as women, I feel like it's, you know, kind of horribly, stupidly, unnecessarily competitive and mean sometimes. So it's wonderful to be in a community with other women who do what you do, who are also jazzed about what you do. So that's great. As for how I work, I really am bad with distraction. So the fewer things around me, the better. Usually a sofa and a dog and a cup of tea, and the Wi-Fi turned off. That's your greatest productivity thing. Everyone should know here. Turn your Wi-Fi off, and you'll get so much done. But that's really how I only get things done, is by turning the Wi-Fi off.
I'm going to disagree about the Wi-Fi.
Really?
Yes, because I agree it's very distracting, and I tend to fall down that hole. But I like to have it on because I like to do a lot of research. A lot of the things I write tend to be science fiction, and a lot of times I get hung up on something like, how would this really move in the vacuum? What would actually happen if this, you know, small thing you think of, well, you want to make it realistic if you're writing that type of story. So I always keep it on for that reason.
Are you good at going back Like going back to work after you find it?
No, I'm terrible.
Okay, so see, I have that same problem, so I write myself notes of things to look up.
Yeah, that's actually probably not a bad way to do it. But then I get so hung up on it, I have to know right then. So,
Nothing wrong with that.
but aside from that, I agree about the distractions because I have a studio and I have a lot of pets, and the pets are a distraction. Yet, I don't mind that distraction. So I have a lot of books and a lot of art and a comfortable sofa and some very loud birds and a cat, and that's pretty much, that's good enough to work with.
I have a husband that's like a pet. Sorry, hon. Yeah, no one went at the end on that one. No, I actually, tone and consistency are very important for me. So what I tend to do is when I'm working on a project, I build a lot of different kinds of cues for myself. So if I'm working on a project, I'll make like a Pinterest board, and then before I write, it's like, okay, we're going to look at that board and things that'll get me into the mindset of that. I also tend to pick, I'll pick like, this is so maddening if you live with me. Again, sorry, honey. I pick a theme song for certain issues or certain characters, and I will literally loop it. So it'll be like, it's like, oh, hey, do you like that new Katy Perry song? Do you like that for 8 hours? Like, and
How many times I've heard roar?
it was the theme. That was the tone I was going for, and that issue's tone was very consistent. No, but there are certain things that you can do that just build habit that are very important to me. And like, for example, I actually went out and I bought a chair. It is my writing chair. I'm not allowed to do anything but write in that chair. You don't sleep in the chair. You try not to eat in the chair. Like, that chair is for the writing so that when you go there, it kind of puts your brain in that. And I'm also a big fan of timers. Yeah, iPads, you can set up like a 10-minute timer, so if you feel yourself slipping off track, really helps.
Yeah, when I write, I also, like, everyone else here is a writer, right? So, okay, when I write, it is very different from when I'm drawing. Writing needs to be, like, silent or music that has no lyrics, like just something quiet, folk music in the background, because, yeah, you have to have that focus. I also cannot turn off my Wi-Fi because I always need to look stuff up. I mean, just, like, I'm a horrible typist and a horrible speller, and I have fights with my spell check, because it's wrong a lot, like a lot, and I'm mad at it. So I'm like, no. So I'm constantly looking things up and having fun with esoteric grammar and being weird. When I'm drawing, though, I need insane amounts of distraction because I need to be entertained while I just sit there and repetitively ink and ink and ink and color and color and color, and it takes so long, and it's like, it's focused, but if I think about it too hard, I think about how my arm hurts and how I should go get tea and how my poor rats are probably lonely. I mean, like, if I just get bored, so I have Netflix on. I live in total disarray. I'm a mess, but as long as I have some dumb thing on in the background, I can paint all day. It's tragic when I run out of whatever stupid thing I'm watching. Really, really bad, because, like, it does set the tone, but it sets, like, my work tone, not the tone of the work. So, like, I'll be drawing, like, really, like, I was trying to remember what it was. I did a version of Wizard of Oz for Penguin last year, and I was watching something super violent the whole time. I'm trying to remember, like, it was.
Was it Oz?
No. Like, and it was just like, it was something completely inappropriate, but because that was my environment every day, it was totally comfortable. I'm like, okay, they're just, having a fight, and I'm over here drawing the scarecrow being really sweet, and it was, so yeah, like, my fiance, who's another half of my writing, he's the one who does the theme song problem, and he always has headphones on. And I feel bad because sometimes I'm like, oh, I like that song. I'll listen to it for a whole hour with you. That's fine. And he's like so embarrassed and he won't do it. So I really understand that one too. Theme songs.
So Robin, since you're our only artist.
Oh my God. Hi.
Do you work digitally or on paper or both, and why?
Both. I start on paper because I am just still, after all these years of being digital, I am way more fluid on paper. And it lets me throw out a lot of design ideas really quickly and filling sketchbooks, and there's something nice and physical there. once I have that, I finish it all up digitally because I really like to experiment, and I will be so cautious and you know, like, I have no confidence when it comes to traditional media. Like, I'll do the same thing every time. But if you give me Photoshop, I'll try a new thing, like, and that's actually something, like, I like to make every project really distinctive and different, which is terrible for branding yourself as an artist, by the way. Like, all you writers are like, oh, I can write this and that. I'm like, artists don't get to do that. Like, you can do it once you're established, but it's really hard to establish yourself if everything you do looks different. So, yeah, like, that's a thing for me. Like, I try to keep whatever project I'm doing, I either do everything on paper first and then digital, or I try to keep it, like, I actually inked. For some reason, I decided that Wizard of Oz is going to be inked in real ink and not digital ink. So I had to ink it in real ink, and once you start, you can't switch over in the middle of a book like that. I mean, that does not fly. They don't like that. So, like, whatever I do, I have to stick with it the whole time, and it's nice to be able to do both, but yeah, it's really nice to have the freedom of digital to just actually switch things up and experiment and try something new and change a color palette. And also, when your editor wants something different, you don't cry for 3 days while you're trying to, like, repaint every single thing and try to find a way to get your gouache to layer right. I mean, like, you don't have to worry about that kind of thing if it's digital. You're just like, okay, it's all blue now. Have fun. It's all blue.
So for those of you who work on licensed comics, do you feel like it's an easier entry for you as I hate to ask questions about gender. I try to avoid it. But do you feel like there was an easier point of entry on licensed work as a female for you?
Gods, no, I write for Transformers. No, I mean, in terms of working on license, I don't know that there is an easy way for most women to do comics. You know, I mean, it's hard. It's a hard business to get into, period.
Yeah, is
And
it easy for anybody?
Yeah,
Is there
it's
an easy
not-
way for guys to get into comics? Because I
It's-
know a lot of people who want to know.
yeah. It's a really hard business to get into, and I feel like, and this is just my assumptions, but I feel like there's a lot of extra baggage about being raised as a woman that, you know, is very counterproductive to being in comics. So things like walking up to random strangers and asking them to give you money. Like, that's extremely difficult. Writers aren't the most social people, but, like, telling a writer to go to a convention, which for comic book writers kind of functions as a 4-day-long job interview from 9 in the morning to midnight, and for 5 hours of that, you're going to be kind of buzzed. But remember, you need to have a buzz so they don't think you're a prude, but you shouldn't be too buzzed because you're talking to your future boss. Like...
No slurring.
That is not an easy road to navigate, and it's really hard to hear no so many times. My first instinct is always like, oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, I'm sorry to take up your time. I'm just gonna sit in this corner, you know, like, don't even look at me. It's fine. But you really do need to keep knocking on that door for years sometimes. It doesn't matter if it's creator owned or not.
Yeah, I agree. I guess probably a year ago, I would have said that working in licensed comics as a woman is a little bit more difficult because you want to branch out, you want to do things that aren't so girly, because at the time I was only doing really girly things. And then I was kind of lucky once My Little Pony took off. I thought I was going to be stuck in a hole of writing pink things forever. But as soon as that kind of took off, I actually got more opportunities to write things that were outside of that sort of zone. So a year ago, I've been like, yeah, it's really hard to get out of Pinktown. But luckily, it seems like things are kind of changing in that if you write well and you do have to kind of teach yourself to keep at it, which I think is a thing for women. It's hard to, email somebody who doesn't email you back for months. Like, it's hard to keep being like, hey, you want to hire me? And not sound like I just did. So I think working in licensed stuff, it's great on your resume. It's a great environment. It can at times be difficult to branch out into other genres because everybody's like, oh, kids, women, kids. Kids love women. Women love kids. But I think if you honestly keep trying and don't actually think of it that way, then you'll have a lot more success in branching out.
That's nice to know, because I was really worried about Pinktown. As a woman, no, seriously, when I'm going around, I'm like, oh my God, they're going to put me on the kids' book. It's not that I don't want to do kids' book, but I feel like I'm a little worried that once I get on, if I ever get on a kids' book, I'll never get out of it again. So sometimes I deliberately write really horrific stuff just to really, like, because I think it does. You don't want to get stereotyped very early on, right? I mean. So I think I wrote a war story. One of my first stories was a war story about a veteran, just to make sure everyone knows I can write guys that are going through traumatic experiences, I don't know.
See, that cuts both ways, though, because I feel like there's a sniper at the gate of Pinktown making sure I don't get in. Like,
That's
I would
possible.
love to go to Pinktown. I think I remember once I was talking to someone at IDW, and I was like, hey, what do you think if I pitched a pony comic? And they laughed. And I was like, okay, that's
I'm
not...
working on a story with Agnes Garboska just to make sure. Yeah, so I'm like trying to edge my way into Pinktown, but I'm not in there yet. So
We're friendly. There's lots of candy.
yeah, it's
I think
pretty.
there's a danger of getting, not ghettoized, but like sort of stuck in, you're a woman writer, write women.
Well, I think you have to really speak up and say what you want to do. And otherwise people will make assumptions
Yeah.
that are completely incorrect. And I think that was the hardest thing for me to learn, that, oh, it's okay, I can speak up and say, no, I would rather do science fiction. I like doing the research. I want to do the dark stuff. And because when I first started, everyone was like, oh, but would you like to do the all ages stuff? And I'm like, I don't know anything about kids, no.
Although when it comes to writing women in comics, there's still so few comics centered around
Yeah.
a woman. I would never turn down, like, we would like you to write this woman. Yes, please, please. 4 of us, we will all write these women, more women,
How
please.
about more
Go
female
for it.
characters?
Yeah.
That's right, yeah.
If anybody has any questions, we can do some Q&A. I don't know if anybody, no? If you can go up to them, Mike, sorry, just so they can.
Oh, sure.
And we'll all be really quiet while you walk there.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of self-conscious about the whole, like, your women tell me about kids writing thing, but I'm working on an all-ages title project right now. So if anyone has any, like, advice on writing, things that both kids and adults can enjoy, that would be awesome.
That's my favorite thing. I guess my advice is to not think about it. Write a story that you like and that you want to write, and if it's something that resonates with you, it'll resonate both with the kids and with the adults. It's like Muppets or anything like that. Like, if the story is good, then everyone will find something in it. So try not to stress too much about it.
I actually have a really unique viewpoint on that because I've worked on Transformers for a really long time, and I've written Transformers from everything from adults to all the way down to a target age of 4. And what I find and yes, I can do it. Well, I can write for young kids. But I find the best way to do it is essentially the best way to write an all-ages book that appeals to both kids and adults is to scale the world accordingly. So, for example, it stops things from feeling forced. So, for example, if I'm working on Transformers Rescue Bots, that was something where it's geared towards very young children, and so no one can be stabbing each other. That's not something that happens. Well, how do you make that feel natural? Well, all the characters are rescuers, so they naturally were not going to do that. It's the times when all ages, I feel like, gets into trouble is when your character is fighting against the outside limitations of the age that you're going for. So the most important thing is that if you want to make sure in your world that there's not a lot of violence or nudity or whatever you want, that's going to feel as natural as possible as long as you make the world a world where that isn't obviously lacking. You can't go and write an all ages book set in Sin City. It's just going to look bizarre, you know?
Yeah, from the kidlit world, the big thing is to never write down to children ever, because they can tell. Kids, and I don't know who remembers being a kid and hating things that were written down to you. I'm sorry, I love dinosaurs. A lot. Like a lot. Really love dinosaurs. Draw a lot of dinosaurs. Give me a dinosaur book. My dinosaurs will be amazing. I love dinosaurs. We went to see Walking with Dinosaurs, and we almost walked out because it somehow ended up with narration, and the dinosaurs were talking, and it was all like, hey, kids, Doritos skateboards, dubstep, and you're like, no. Like, no, these are dinosaurs, please don't make them into what you think kids like. And I remember, it put me back to being 10 years old, and remembering how much I hated it when stuff was written to be as slangy and kid as possible, and I'm like, that's not what we're like. Kids
Right.
are people, they're really, really people, and they really don't want to be talked down to. And what you're saying is exactly the way to do it. You don't have to pretend like there's all these big things that you just can't talk to them about. Just don't have them in there.
Yeah.
Like, just, make that outside the purview of your story, and you won't have to be, like, patronizing and, like, hand-waving and hiding things. I mean, just, like, make sure that's not an element of what you're doing. But for the most part, just don't ever, ever talk down.
Yeah, that reminds me, like, and avoid the labels. Like, don't feel like you need to keep up with the slang or something like that. We all remember in the 90s when it became super cool to put X's everywhere, like every
was
word that
X
had
too.
an X had 2 X's now, and everything was misspelled because kids love misspellings. Like, that, remember how fake that felt, and just avoid that. It's better to build your own slang that will be timeless than to sit there and try and get your characters to say whatever the current television slang is, which is usually at least 5 years old from what the actual slang is.
Since this is Hire This Woman, what would you say to those publishers that, have the panel of 10 middle-aged white dudes with beards that they've had for the past 10 years, that they know, like they have their people they go to. They know they turn their stuff on time. They know they do whatever. Why diversify? Why hire this woman? Why try something new? Why go outside their comfort zone?
Can I start? Because women and kids don't read enough comics. Because they're not written for them. And they used to have comics for kids. Nowadays, it's coming back. It's coming back. But superhero comics were for kids once upon a time, and they're not anymore. And that's fine. But if you have people who've spent their entire lives making really, really dark, rich, wonderful Batman stories that no child should ever look at because they don't have, because it's just like, come on, you don't want them, they're not ready to understand what you're doing. You need to have new things. You need new perspectives. You need to understand that gay people read comics, and you need to represent them not as what a straight dude thinks that they're like, but actually from the inside. You've got to make things for the people who are your potential audience, or you're going to be stuck with the same tiny group of people. Even all the superhero films and stuff haven't necessarily made superhero comics much bigger than they were. It's bigger, but it's not like, it's still not something where every kid reads comics again.
Yeah, well, I definitely think that, honestly, I feel like a lot of the market that is still comics are still being geared towards is a saturated market. You've kind of, and the only way to grow beyond that is not to push a saturated market more, it's to find new marketplaces that are expanding. I think the fact that Avengers can be making, like, literally it was like $1 billion or something like that, some ungodly, all the money. And we know that, they released that women are the most likely people to see movies. And so it's like, why isn't that audience translating into comic books? That's untapped dollars for you to be going after. And quite frankly, if you're looking at your sales and your comics are flat or your books look the same, an easy way to fix that is don't have creators that all look the same or that all live the same life. It's not to say that men can't write women, but a variety of different life experiences will give you a variety of different styles that will appeal to a variety of different customer bases. So you can be a business or you can be a clubhouse, but you kind of can't be both.
And I think the corollary to that is why waste half of your talent pool? Because there could be amazing untapped talents, and this is true for science and technology and pretty much everywhere where women are underrepresented, that's just wasting talent.
Yeah, I definitely agree. If you just want to be completely dollar sign about it, like women want to buy crap, and we want to buy comics, we want to buy things we relate to, and it's like it's not that hard. We're here. There's lots of us here. We want to buy stuff. Let us buy it, and you can have the money. It's not rocket science, and there's a lot of us in the industry who would love to make more work. And who can facilitate that really super duper easy. And I'm sorry we don't have beards.
You want a beard, then?
We could
You
do
had to
that.
bring up the beard, Jason.
I mean, I'll just add a little anecdote on that because I was, I've become friendly with the manager at the Forbidden Planet in New York, and I was asking him, what's your top selling title? Because I'm thinking, it's going to be like Batman, right? He said, no, Saga 3 times over Batman, 3 times. And I'm like, what is it about Saga? He says it's all women and it's all new readers. I mean, that's, people need to pay attention to that.
That's all the time we have. Thank you guys so much for coming, and thank you to the wonderful
Thank you.